Anybody who says that I claim to be able to have the argument that can meet this challenge is making stuff up about me. The fact that reason alone is ineffective at changing other people's desires does not imply that we are powerless to bring about changes in those desires. The way I put this point in my book is, you can reason all you want with your flat tire on your car without it changing places with the spare in the trunk. But this does not imply that you are powerless to get the flat tire changed. More importantly, reason does have an important role to play in telling you how to go about changing the tire. It will tell you what will work and what will not work. Reason itself is what tells you that trying to persuade the flat tire to change places with the spare in the trunk is not a good plan. It tells you to get some tools, the right tools, and how to use something other than reason to get the job done. In the case of getting hateful Diforchan to fulfill the desires of others, reason tells us that reason alone is not the tool to use. Reason tells us that hateful Diforchan is a human being, I will assume. As such, he has an aversion to pain and a desire for pleasure. He desires his freedom because a lack of freedom is a lack of opportunity to act and to fulfill his desires. He also desires money because money is a useful tool for the fulfillment of many desires as well. Consequently, reason tells me not to use reason to get Diforchan to refrain from thwarting the desires of others. Instead, reason tells us that we can use threats to thwart Diforchan's other desires as a way of modifying his behavior. We can go to hateful Diforchan and say, if we find you thwarting the desires of others in particular ways, we will act so as to thwart these other desires you have. We will take away your money through fines, we will take away your freedom through imprisonment, and we may even take away your life. You may not have a desire to fulfill the desires of others. However, we, those others whose desires you do not care about, have reasons to set up institutions to make it the case that fulfilling the desires you do have is best accomplished in ways that do not thwart the desires of others too much. However, reason tells us that this method has an important weakness. We have to actually catch hateful Diforchan thwarting the desires of others in order to punish him. If Diforchan finds a way to act on his hate and avoid the penalties, then the penalties cease to be a deterrence. Reason tells us to look for another way to influence Diforchan's behavior. Okay, now folks gather around, we need to come to discuss the hateful Diforchan problem. Okay, group, we need a way to deal with the hateful Diforchan problem. Diforchan has dispositions that cause him to thwart the desires of others. We have threatened him with penalties if we catch him causing serious harm, those threats being too desire thwarting to justify their use against light or trivial harms or hurts. However, threats have important and significant limits. We need suggestions for how to deal with the hateful Diforchan problem that can work even when we have no hope of catching Diforchan in the act. One person in our meeting raises his hand. Oh, Mr. Alonso, I know. Let's tell Diforchan and everybody else that we have this big invisible friend that sees everything. In a life after death, if Diforchan does anything wrong, even if we do not catch him, our big invisible friend sees all. This will give him a reason not to do mean things. In the interest of space, I will list only two of problems with that option. First, it's not true. One of the things that we want people to have is a love for the truth and a dislike for deception and for careless reasoning. Both of those traits tend to thwart the desires of others. Both of them are traits we would have to promote and encourage if we are going to depend on this story of the big invisible friend to keep hateful Diforchan in line. Second, what if we make a mistake? We can claim that this big invisible friend tells us what these moral truths are, but it is still going to be something we invented. We could be wrong. What are we going to do if, for example, we say that the big invisible friend condemns homosexuality because it is a threat to the traditional family, only to discover that it is no threat at all? In fact, Given the importance of intimate relationships, we may get to no benefit at all from such a rule, and instead be driving a lot of good people into suicide. What do we do then? We can say, sorry folks, it looks like our big invisible friend made a mistake. We might be locking in some evil for centuries, even millennia to come. The first point also rules out the intrinsic value proposal. This option says that we are going to tell people that certain types of acts have intrinsic merit or are intrinsically wrong. We are then going to fill them with a drive to bring about that which has intrinsic merit and an aversion to that which is intrinsically bad. This option also depends on false premises and sloppy thinking. Besides, it will not work unless we give people a desire for that which they believe has intrinsic value. If we are going to do that, we might as well just give people a desire for something that actually exists, such as kindness and honesty itself. The proposal that I go with does just that. Fact. Some of our desires are malleable. Things that happen to us have effects on what we like or do not like. By controlling the things that happen to people, it is possible to control what they like or dislike. To reduce the amount of hatred in the world, we produce those things that experience tells us reduce the amount of hatred. Two sets of things that affect what people like and dislike are praise and condemnation. With the tire, reason alone cannot change the tire, but can tells us what tools to use and how to use them to get the tire changed. Reason alone cannot change hateful Differshan's dispositions. However, it can tell us that what tools to use that will change his dispositions, or to help ensure that some child born today will not grow up to be like hateful Differshan. Reason tells us how and where to use our tools of praise and condemnation. Naturally, reason tells us that people have reason to use these tools to promote desires that tend to fulfill other desires, and to inhibit desires that thwart other desires, where it is possible to do so. Reason tells us to use those tools against hatefulness and in favor of kindness and generosity. Conclusion. So hateful Differshan asks me, why should I, who for the purpose of this question hate everyone, have desires that tend to fulfill the desires of others? I return to the question, what do you mean by should? What am I going to answer is, the claim that you should have these desires that fulfill the desires of others is the claim that people generally have reason to use the tool of praise on those who exhibit such desires, and the tool of condemnation, and in the worst cases, punishment, and those who act are hateful. On those whose acts are hateful. Typos. It would be nice to be able to get you to want to fulfill the desires of others through reason alone. Unfortunately, reason cannot be used for that particular job. It is ineffective. But reason tells us what tools we can use. Praise and condemnation. The claim that you should have desires that fulfill the desires of others is the claim that reason tells us to use the tools of praise and condemnation to help bring it about that people generally have such desires. That's my answer. I think if you look around, you will find this answer in much of what I write. However, many people do not see it because they are assuming that I'm answering a question on how to use reason alone to change people's desires, when he's not. That is something that cannot be done. But that does not mean that we are powerless to change desires, and to do so in ways guided by reason. So I hope you enjoyed this video, or videos, probably videos, 2 videos. Keep on. I appreciate your interest in the truth, and I encourage you to go on being a skeptic, because that's good for you and that's good for other people to test their own views and to reformulate their positions. And just as long as it's a peaceful, intelligent, civilized interaction, I couldn't be more agreeable to it. And I thank you. I really thank you for what you've been doing. It has helped clarify my own views a great deal. Be cool.